Welcome to the Ignition News. We love to have you here, but remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Click that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment below. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's get busy with the truth.
Uncensored source for the actual truth in what is happening in the United States of America and around the world. We are not bought by the billionaires. We are here to be your source of truth in a time where truth matters more than it ever has. Be sure to follow along with your favorite platform on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or Substack. Let's get busy with the truth. Welcome to the Ignition News. Level 9.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Ignition News. It is Friday the 13th. Isn't that wild? Good morning. I was trying to get us fired up on a separate streaming platform, but I guess it's just not meant to be for today. So whoa. It is working. Wow, there we go. That's awesome. Let me go ahead and mute that. Let me mute that audio. It's working. That's great news. Okay. If anyone's familiar with the Rumble, we're going on Rumble today, which feels a little bit wild, but we're going to give it a shot. We'll see what kind of crowd we catch over there. We'll see. So good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. It is Friday. It is Friday the 13th. Let's get into the show. I do want to take a minute and let you know that we are broadcasting live, but I need you to follow the show on our favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, Substack. It's all there, all for you to find. So please go ahead and find us over there. On this day in 1781, we found Uranus. The planet Uranus. Astronomer William Herschel discovered the seventh planet from the sun. Originally, he thought it was a comet, but he later found out that he had found a new planet. So there we go. In 1862, there was a strike against the Fugitive Slave Act. The U.S. federal government passed an act prohibiting the return of slaves to their owners by the military. This was a critical structural move that undermined the Fugitive Slave Act and served as a precursor to the Emancipation Proclamation. In 1943, German forces began the final liquidation of the Jewish ghetto in Krakow. On this day, a plot by German officers to assassinate Adolf Hitler failed when a bomb planted on his plane failed to detonate. In 2013, Mr. Pope Francis was elected, and on this day in 2020, a national emergency was declared in the United States of America in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. How far we've come and how far we have fallen. It's really good to be here. Let's see what else. Whose birthdays do we have today? The rapper Common. It's his birthday today. L. Ron Hubbard. Okay. And what else? Oh, holidays. It's World Sleep Day. Totally fine with that one. It's National Canine Veterans Day. And we don't stand cop dogs. I'm sorry. Let me just take a brief aside. We don't celebrate cop dogs. That's not something we celebrate. Dogs should not be cops. That's a brutal, cruel thing to do to dogs. There's no good use of dogs as cop dogs. Look at my dog's coming out of the kennel now because he's wanting to support this movement. It's National Canine Veterans Day. The best thing you can do to support your canine veterans is to make sure that your cops don't use dogs. It is Solar Appreciation Day. And congratulations, today's the day we found Uranus. Today's the day we found Uranus. See what I did? I brought it in. We've got a lot of stories to talk about, but let me go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, we do have more disappointing news today that they have confirmed now that 6 American men and women in the armed forces have now died as a result of this plane crash, the KC-135 that crashed over Iraq. And, once I saw that, I was remembering Iraq, and so I went and I saw, and I was going back into my memory bank, and I was looking at some photographs from Iraq. I ended up on Reddit, on a thread of Reddit of this really jarring photograph. I don't know if you've seen it. It was pretty popular for a few days on Reddit, where it was this small child, this young girl who was covered in blood because her parents, they were in a car and the car that they were traveling on was fired on by an American service patrol, killing almost instantly their parents. Just a riddle of bullets. There were 6 total people in the car. And what had happened is they were at a party, and there was, of course, a curfew. Most of Iraq was under curfew during this time. And it was late, it was dark, but culturally, the thing, this is a good example of this. Culturally, in Iraq, things are like, okay, 10 o'clock ish. Okay, it's 10 o'clock ish. So there's a curfew, and, they're leaving this party and they're traveling through the streets in Iraq, and the soldiers who speak only English are shouting at them to stop, and they don't understand what's going on. And then the first thing they hear is gunfire from the troops. And then what do you do if you're in a car and there's gunfire? You try to get away. So they sped away, and the military unloaded onto their car, absolutely unloaded onto their vehicle, killing the parents of all these children, leaving stranded 4 orphan children. And this really jarring photograph of this girl covered in blood. She's probably in her mid-20s now. She is the only one of those children that survived, by the way. The rest of her brothers and sisters either died as part of the conflict or later died as part of their injuries. And it reminded me, this visceral image, there were thousands more images and hundreds of thousands of more stories of men, women, children, and families killed by American bullets again. And it's not just our men and women. It's children. I just can't get that out of my head today. I was thinking about that little girl, and just, she's now in her, like I said, she's probably in her mid-20s now. And all of that for what? We accomplished nothing. We spent trillions of dollars, and yet here we are in Iran again. So I think it's worth reflecting on. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here. Speaking of the conflict, I do want to talk to you about something we've talked about on a couple times. That is the first story for the day, which is AI. Bloomberg dropped a piece earlier this week. We talked about it earlier, the book called Project Maven, and it lays out this strategy about the fact that the United States military is absolutely obsessed with AI. They've gotten hooked on AI, and this makes sense. A lot of the people in command and control in the military, a lot of the people who've been there longer, are young men and women who grew up playing video games. And we've inserted this new technology. But in the first 24 hours of Operation Epic Fury, we dropped 1,000, or not dropped 1,000 bombs. We hit 1,000 targets. So we hit 1,000 targets in the first hours alone. Well, you can't possibly do that without utilizing some type of technology, like automated technology, autonomous targeting technology. But it turns out that the U.S. military is absolutely hooked on this stuff. They did it faster and with less manpower. Now, they haven't overtly said this, but how do you target 1,000 targets faster with less manpower? Oh, great. We got our warning. I see at the bottom. That's amazing. Of course, just hours before the bombs started falling in Iran, Trump declared Anthropic a supply chain risk to cut them off. It seems like they may have actually used Anthropic nonetheless. The United States is now fighting a war with AI, with very few ethical boundaries in place. And now you have Sam Altman on his hands and knees going to the Pentagon saying, use chat. Use chat, bro. Of course, there's the girls' school. On March 3rd, a Tomahawk missile struck the girls' school. 175 people dead. It was at least a double tap. And if you're not sure what a double tap is when you strike a target and then you hit it again when people are going to rescue people. That's the technical definition of the double tap. But it now looks like it might have been a triple tap. We are in uncharted territory here, folks. We're using AI at the helm of a Pentagon. In charge of the Pentagon is Pete Hegseth, who we'll talk about in our next story. At a Pentagon briefing, the defense secretary, by the way, he had a briefing. He was talking about the 4 American service members at the time that had been killed in the KC-135. We now know that that total is 6. At that time, the recovery operation was still ongoing. CNN had aired a report kind of saying that the United States had underestimated Iran's willingness to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. We've talked about the Strait of Hormuz. We don't need to revisit this. It's 20% of the world's oil supply. And when CNN asked and followed up on this is what Hegseth had to say. So he gets up on the stand. They ask him, well, did you not underestimate Iran's ability to close off the Strait of Hormuz? It's actually called the Straits, I learned yesterday. And he told he told them something that I think is really worth noting. I wouldn't have covered this story normally, but he said this: the sooner David Ellison takes over CNN, the better. That's what Pete Hegseth said. Of course, Ellison is the CEO of Paramount. They recently won a bidding war of Time Warner, which owns CNN, and apparently one of the things that is part of that deal is that they're going to install Bari Weiss to further control the news. A lot of people have left the newsroom at CBS. Anderson Cooper kind of famously left 60 Minutes. What's kind of weird about that is Anderson Cooper leaves 60 Minutes, right? Kind of in protest of Bari Weiss. And then it ends up getting purchased by the Ellisons. And now you have the head of the Department of Defense. I'm never going to call it the Department of War. That's not a serious name. Literally saying out loud, the sooner the billionaire controls the media, the better. Pretty wild stuff. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ignition News. I do want to let you know that today is March 13th, Friday the 13th. We do broadcast live on many platforms, but please consider following the show on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Let's get on to the next story. I'm sure you've heard about this allegation of there's an allegation against the president by a 13-year-old. Pam Bondi's Justice Department is sitting on at least 37 pages of FBI documents related to a woman who accused the president of sexually abusing her when she was 13 years old. The documents are part of the Epstein files release, and that release was mandated by Congress. By the way, I will say that the congressional Democrats in the Senate have done one thing which is really smart, is they've put the DOJ on notice. They've said, hey, we're missing these files. What's going on with this? The smart thing about that is, should they maintain control of Congress in an election in the midterms, they're going to actually be able to put those people on notice. And should we have an opportunity to retake the government, that's going to mean those people at DOJ can't say, oh, I didn't know we weren't supposed to erase these files. I had no idea we weren't supposed to destroy the Epstein files. So rather smartly, they did send a notice to put them on notice. Here's what we're missing. You need to maintain this information. I need to have some further information about this. And now that's all a paper trail. And I promise you, it may seem dark right now, but that paper trail, I got to give credit where credit's due. By putting the DOJ on notice, they're locking them in. What we don't know is, what are they going to do with these 37 pages that purportedly corroborate FBI interviews with the then 13-year-old who claims that Donald Trump sexually abused her? The FBI interviewed her 4 times in 2019. And let me just pause to say something. You don't interview someone 4 times if you're the FBI if you don't think that it is a serious allegation. A source has told the Miami Herald that the pages that they are withholding add a lot of credibility to her testimony. And you can imagine, unfortunately, what that is. It's really sick stuff when you think about it. It's very disgusting. Now, NPR discovered these missing documents by analyzing serial numbers that the DOJ used to release these documents. And lo and behold, there were missing numbers. 37 pages are unaccounted for, including interview notes, a report from law enforcement, and more records. So why is the FBI hiding 37 pages about what they themselves determined to be credible accusations by a 13-year-old of sexual assault by the sitting president of the United States? Oh, I guess we just answered the question, didn't we? Now, the DOJ is saying this. They're saying the missing pages are duplicates. They say the public cannot review the pages to verify that claim, but that members of Congress are welcome to visit a reading room. So they're saying, hey, these are copies, but we actually can't show you the copies to prove that they're copies, but your congressional representative can come and check it out. Of course, we know that the DOJ is using technology to track, record, and monitor what the congressional members are looking at, which is a gigantic constitutional violation. There's a separation of powers. The DOJ is part of the executive branch. Congress is tasked with constitutionally providing oversight. Because of the Epstein law that they passed, the redaction law that they passed, they have every right to inspect any document they want. But the DOJ is tracking them. It's violations all the way down, laws all the way down. And if you're feeling a little bit gloomy, I do want to tell you, the right people in the right places are setting these DOJ officials up, are setting the administration officials up to eventually hold them accountable. They are. Not everyone. I'm not talking about Chuck Schumer. I'm not talking about Hakeem Jeffries. I'm talking about smart legal minds who are essentially laying this legal trap. And people are going to go to jail for this. People are going to go to jail for what they did with this. Perhaps not for the horrible crimes of the Epstein files, although that seems to make sense to me. How you could jail Ghislaine Maxwell, how you could jail Jeffrey Epstein, and not jail the men who these crimes that they... Okay, you see this? I struggle with explaining this because it just seems so obvious to me. You can't jail Epstein and Maxwell because they committed crimes. On the other end of those crimes, if not understanding that is, on the other end of those crimes are men who committed those crimes. It's like saying there's 8 bank robbers and we got the guy who had the getaway car and we got the guy who bought the bags for the money on Amazon. The 6 other people, the ones with the guns, the masks, we're not really worried about that. That's essentially what they're saying. Briefly, someone on TikTok says they have the warning, share responsibly on live, confirm sources before sharing and engaging with this. Yes, everyone's getting that warning. That's what Pete Hegseth is talking about. When Pete Hegseth says, I can't wait for David Ellison to own CNN, David Ellison owns TikTok. Pretty wild. So speaking of billionaires, corrupt billionaires, let's get to the last story. And that is the billionaires. And this is more of a commentary from me, by the way. And let's talk about the draft. Because the administration has basically just made it official that they are not going to take the draft off the table. We know that 13 American service members have been killed. It is likely much higher, by the way. Why do we know that? Because it took 11 days for the Department of Defense to acknowledge that 150 service members were critically, if not seriously injured on day one in Kuwait. They had to stop admitting people to a hospital to take care of all of the service members that were injured on day one. And now the White House is saying, hey, we can't say there's going to be no draft. But let's be precise about what that would actually require. You cannot, as the president, say, oh, there's a draft. The president does not have the authority to implement a military draft. Congress would have to pass legislation amending the Military Selective Service Act. There's no such legislation pending right now. The bill passed in 2024. It did automatically register men who apply for driver's licenses or federal student aid, or who, that's actually true. I just realized that. So they've already got them registered, but there is not a draft. Only 23% of Americans between 17 and 24 currently meet the military's basic fitness test requirements, by the way. If this war goes on longer than 4 to 5 weeks, those numbers are going to matter. Of course, the administration will not acknowledge how long this conflict is going to last. Now, so far, I think it is unlikely. It seems rather impossible to imagine boots on the ground. Of course, Israel has stated that they would love to have American boots on the ground. But then again, nothing about this conflict has gone the way that we were told it was going to go. Not one piece of this war has happened as we were told it was. And that is because this administration had fundamentally erred in their calculations. I'm trying to think of a good metaphor here. But they're basically stuck in quicksand. And every little thing that they do to try to get out of the quicksand, just like in quicksand, every little thing they do, they move around and they shuffle, it just gets them deeper and deeper into the quagmire and the quicksand. The Straits of Hormuz still closed. They're burning boats. Our military bases, let me just point this out. Major satellite companies that provide satellite imagery as a service are delaying the release of updated maps in that region. The reason that these companies are delaying the release of the satellite imagery is because I think we're going to see American military infrastructure and bases and core ground infrastructure that you have paid billions of dollars for up in smoke and flames and rubble. Why else would they delay it? Why else would they say, oh, we're not going to do that? But this war has not just cost us $13 trillion. I did some analysis before I close out. Do you remember what Pam Bondi said in Congress? Do you remember that? The Dow Jones is $50,000. Do you remember this? Well, when I did this math yesterday, the Dow Jones had actually dropped from that to 46,841. I bet it's lower right now. Let's go take a look. Dow Jones. Let's see. 46,590. So in addition to $13 billion, which is what we've paid for the infrastructure, since Pam Bondi had that little smart-ass quip, we have lost, get this, we have lost $1.38 trillion in the Dow Jones. We have erased from history $1.38 trillion, eclipsing the $13 billion that we have spent on the war. How do I come to that figure? Simple. You look at the market cap, 50,000 points, the high, and you look at the current market cap, 46,841. That was when I did the math. Each point it goes down, it's $438 million. We've lost $1.38 trillion since then. And we're just getting warmed up, I promise you. But let me close out with my final thought on this. It's always the people who don't have any stakes that love to drop bombs on kids in foreign countries, that love to terrorize these foreign countries. It's always the billionaires, the multimillionaires, the ultra high net worth individuals. It's always these members of Congress who have these insider stock trading deals. But most of all, it is the corrupt Epstein class and these billionaires who love to send our children to war. They love to send our sons and daughters to the desert. They look the other way when the folded flags return, when the caskets draped in the American flag are loaded off the cargo planes. They look the other way. They had a meeting. They were busy. They were creating shareholder value. They couldn't be bothered to give respect. The President of the United States took an opportunity to stand by a flag-draped coffin and hawk a fucking hat, a baseball cap, product placement over the coffin of a dead soldier. So if they want to go to war, but send the billionaires' kids, not the kids from fucking Kansas, the fields in North Dakota, college in Texas, the Sonic Drive-In in Las Vegas, not the kids from a high school just graduating this summer. You billionaires want your war? I'll drive them to the recruiter's office myself. Don't worry about it. For free. You don't have to pay. No Uber. You guys don't use Uber. Who are we kidding? You want to go to war? You want to terrorize these brown kids? Send your kids. Send your sons and daughters. We're not sending our sons and daughters. You're not drafting our sons and daughters. We're not going to watch them go through this generational trauma. Sit down and talk to someone who went to Iraq. Sit down and talk to someone who went to Afghanistan. They saw things they are never going to forget, not to mention the military suicide rate. The rate of suicide in veterans for veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan is something like 4 times the generally extremely high rate of suicide. It's one of the reasons it's as high as it is, because most of the veterans in our armed forces right now are veterans of those conflicts. We don't even talk about that's where we started the show, and it's where we're going to end the show. We don't even talk about some of the terrible things that happened. Abu Ghraib, do you remember this? War is not AI. It is not a video game. It's terrible. All of you, surely, if you have gray in your beard like me, you certainly know someone that you went to high school with. You certainly know someone that you maybe went to college with, or that you knew back in the day, who went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and you know that they came back and they were never the same, if they came back at all. And it's more likely than not that you know someone that died. Someone said, my husband, 3 deployments, he is out. Not the same person. Another person says, I've been told I've changed after my 2 deployments to Iraq. Of course. But if you billionaires want your war, I fully expect that your children will go sign up for military service. And of course, nobody wants something bad to happen to them. But the reason that you have not done that is quite simple. You know I have no pretense that any billionaire is watching my show. There's no doubt about it. Let's not kid ourselves. But as the working class, we've got to start realizing there's something like 900 billionaires in the United States of America. I'll look that up for the next show. There's 350 million of us. Why are we letting this infinitesimally small group of people tell us how to live? Why are we letting this infinitesimally small group of people tell us that our sons and daughters have to go off and die in the desert? Again, we have collective power. We are stronger as a collective unit. For some reason, we choose not to use all of that massive amount of power. We can stop it. We can say no. Feet on the streets. I was talking about this the other day. There's this group in Las Vegas that does this like Handmaid's Tale thing. It's very cool. And apparently it's all over the country. It's these women who do the full regalia. They put on the Handmaid's Tale, the handmaid, the red thing and the white hat, and they go and they protest. And I think that's great. But they only go protest at like the steps of the federal courthouse on a Saturday. No one's life is being disrupted by you going to the steps of the courthouse on a Saturday. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be dismissive. It's not my intention at all. But if you want to know why you're not getting the result, it's because you're doing the same thing. You're standing at the place where the police told you you could stand on the day that it's not going to bother anyone and making your point to people who already know that you're there. I don't mean to dismiss that. That's not my intention. But performative protest has its place. Trust me, I know. Trust me, I know. But nonviolence does not mean not disruptive. And we as the working class have specifically chosen the least disruptive path to show our resistance. For some reason, we have let let me just, this is where I'm saying, and surely you can follow this. We let the billionaires disrupt our lives every day, make everything worse, everything more expensive. The quality of everything is worse. I was driving my car the other day, and I was just so frustrated because there's like Android Auto in the car, and the Android Auto, like, it's so shitty that like when I try to connect my phone, I can't connect my phone, and so I have to, every time I use Android Auto, I have to go delete my phone, add my phone back, and this is a very subtweet here, but like I just realized while I was doing that, probably for the 100th time in a day, I was like, everything is getting shittier. Everything is getting worse. Because you know what? Why would you hire 2 engineers to fix your Android Auto in your car? Why would you do that when you can make one person do the job of all 3 people? It's a very small disruption nonetheless. But yes, look it. It's exactly what I'm talking about. The billionaire cut off 2 engineers, the engineers whose job it was to make sure the fucking phone connects to the car. He got laid off. And we allow them to inconvenience us. And then we say to ourselves, oh, you know, we got to stand in the little cage they told us. They literally make cages to protest now. Do you know this? The First Amendment zone. We have allowed this to happen. When they have massive events, the DNC has a convention. They set up fences for people to protest. Could there be anything more absurd than this? First Amendment zones. First Amendment zones. Little Guantanamo bays in our own country. I got on my rant. I'm on it now. Here we go. Little caged off Guantanamo bays where you're allowed the grace of protesting as long as you're not too loud, as long as you don't cause trouble, as long as nobody gets offended by your sign, as long as the cops decide not to pepper spray you or pepper ball you or shoot you. Yeah, then you still have the First Amendment. Good job. I like your Handmaid's Tale costume. It's really cool. Do you see all I'm saying? And of course, the lawyer's probably texting me right now. As a reminder, on the Ignition News, we do not endorse or support any acts of violence. But I also can't endorse this idea of a First Amendment zone. Do you know how absurd that is? And the difference is we don't have the stones to do what the fascists do. The fascists go to the Supreme Court and they go, "Hey, we want the president to have immunity to send SEAL Team 6 after his opponents." You got it. That's what the Supreme Court literally said. We don't have the stones to go, "Oh, are you fucking kidding me? I have to schedule my protest with the police?" Sure. No, fuck you. I'm suing you. We're going to the Supreme Court. John Roberts, tell me now, is this what it means? The text of the amendment? The First Amendment? Where does it say there? They'll strip away all kinds of provisions for the Second Amendment. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, there's a Second Amendment, okay? This is exactly my point. They will go to the Supreme Court so they can do that. But nobody on our side has the stones to say, I'm not going to protest on a fence. And this is why we lose. But there are more of us than there are of them. This is the part of the show where I usually give an action item where I say, here's what you're going to do this thing. It's Friday the 13th. So I have a little bit of a different challenge for you today. This weekend, I'm going to challenge you to let loose. I'm going to challenge you to shake off all of this chaos, all of this drama, all of this absolute insanity of the time that we live in. I'm going to challenge you to do something for yourself. Because the thing about being in the fight all of the time is it wears you down. My specific challenge for you today is this. Go pick up the camera or the paintbrush or the pen and go enrich yourself. Be selfish. Be ruthlessly selfish about something you are passionate about. Because, that's the whole point. The whole point of all of this is to take away all of your hope, all of your ambitions, and all of your drive. So go out and do something this weekend. Remove yourself from this chaos just for a little bit. Be ruthlessly selfish about something that you love. And then when we come back next week, you will have that extra energy, that extra fire in your belly, that extra determination, that extra love, passion, energy, the rhapsody of your soul. You've forgotten that, haven't you? I do all the time. I love microphones. It's like one of my passions. Sometimes I just like to sit and talk into the microphone and play it back and just oh, that one sounds really cool. And sometimes I say to myself, it's really busy. You got to get on the show. You're going to run out of time. And I forget to just sit and put the headphones on and just, this microphone, it sounds really cool. I love it. If you have allowed them to take that away from you, then they've already won. And so my act of resistance this weekend is for you to be you, to recharge yourself, to be passionate about something, and to love yourself a little bit more tomorrow than you did today. Because it is that battery of your soul, that battery of your resistance that you have to recharge. So go do something you love for yourself. Don't worry about anything else. You can get back into the shit the next day or the next hour, really, if we're being honest. But please do that for me and come back to the show and let me know what you did. All right? That's the show. Whoosh, whoosh. This has been today's episode of The Ignition News. Please consider following us on all of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Substack. We're here to deliver to you unfiltered, uncensored news. Let's get busy with the truth on The Ignition News.